I could very faintly hear whoever just spoke up.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for attending our annual foster care points of contact training. We're really excited for you all to take time today to connect, to learn, to collaborate. Um, and we will do quick rounds of introduction, and then we'll get right into the content. So I'll start. My name is Aubrey Howard. I work in the Office of School and Student Support with the Maine Department of Education. I wear a few hats, and one of those hats is the State Education Foster Care Point of Contact. And then I will pass it over to Jill.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jill Hunter. I am the manager of field operations for OCFS, and I am also the statewide point of contact for foster care with the Department of Education. So good to see everybody.
And then Sarah.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sarah Ferguson, work for the Department of Education in the Office of Special Services and Inclusive Education. And I work closely with Aubrey when there are questions about students in foster care who happen to have special education and if anyone needs a special education surrogate parent.
Great, thank you. Feel free to put your name if you're with an SAU or OCFS in the chat so we know who is here and who is represented. Throughout this time, we have a lot of content to cover, but feel free to put any questions in the chat. If we're not able to address your question during this training, we will be sending out a follow-up email with the recording and any other information that we cover today. So feel free to put those questions in the chat and we'll either capture those today or follow up next time. I quickly just wanted to highlight the Maine DOE mission where we are supporting the whole student. We do that through the whole student approach by encouraging innovation, respecting educators, providing information, guidance, professional learning, and inspiring trust in our schools.
And for the DHS mission, the department strives to ensure that Maine children grow up in safe, healthy, and supportive environments, allowing them to thrive throughout their lives.
We have quite a few learning objectives. First, we'll be covering the definition of students in foster care, going over the Title I Part 8 educational stability provisions. We will be highlighting the different foster care points of contact, how to find them, how to locate, and how to collaborate. We will be talking about the difference between school of origin and school residence. We'll be reviewing best interest determinations, discussing, educational surrogate parents, talking about immediate enrollment, collaboration strategies, and reviewing how to find some foster care data, as well as regional connections. And Jill's going to take us through some acronyms.
Okay, so the first one, so DOE stands for Department of Education. The SEA is State Education Agency. O3S, Office of School and Student Supports. DHHS, Department of Health and Human Services. OCFS, the Office of Child and Family Services. And CPS stands for Child Protective Services. SAU is a school administrative unit. The LEA is the local education agency. The POC stands for point of contact, and there's the SAU foster care point of contact, also known as the LEA foster care point of contact, OCFS district foster care point of contact related to the entire state. So there's 8 districts in total. SCA is the foster care point of contact and DHS foster care point of contact. And then the BID stands for the best interest determination. And IEP, individualized education program. MUSER, Maine Unified Special Education Regulation. FAPE stands for Free and Appropriate Public Education. And IDEA stands for Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. So we don't expect you to remember all of those, but we wanted to make sure we did an overview. So, thank you. Okay, and then for the next slide, you can just see a quick snapshot in terms of the number of children in state custody across the state. And this map shows how many children we have in state custody across the state of Maine. And you can see the different areas that are highlighted, and it shows them, it breaks them down by different counties.
And so I just wanted to ground us in the federal legal framework for why we are here, for those educational stability provisions for students in foster care. And so this work started in 2008 with the Fostering Connections Act. This was the first federal milestone that recognized that students in foster care required specific educational provisions. In 2013, the Uninterrupted Scholars Act was passed, and this allowed for easier and transparent collaboration between child welfare agencies and education networks while supporting FERPA. And then in 2015, the Every Student Succeeds Act, so ESSA, was reauthorized from the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. And it really laid that framework and foundation for those educational provisions that we will be discussing. So that Title I, Part A. And so we just wanted to share with you how this work has grown over the past few decades. And I'll let Jill take it from here. Oh, Jill, I think you're muted.
Oh, sorry. Just give me 1 second. I'm really sorry. I just hit something and now all I can see is my face. So do you want to cover this one, Aubrey, and I'll do the next one?
Sure, definitely. No
Thank you.
worries. And so breaking down those educational stability provisions, the purpose of why we are here, the purpose of why those provisions exist, is to foster students our highly mobile population. And so the goal is to reduce those school moves and that disruptions. The goal is to provide and allow for those familiar settings for learning, as well as develop and maintain connections, and have the ability to access appropriate coursework, programming, and interventions.
Thank you. So goals for providing educational stability: improve academic achievement, increase grade retention and high school graduation rates, support social and emotional well-being, and reduce chronic absenteeism and disengagement.
In the past November 2024, there was a new non-regulatory guidance that was released. There's a picture here on the side of this guidance. This was talked about in the last annual training. This guidance took those educational federal framework and broke it down into what does this mean and how does this apply to the fields. It was last released in, I believe, 2008, where it was about a 20-page document. And now in 2024, it was released to a 70-page document. There's a lot of information in there, and we can add this to the chat for folks who are interested in it. It's broken down into an FAQ, but it highlights those specific Title I, Part A educational stability provisions for students in foster care. And those provisions that we will be discussing today is that best interest determination. What does that mean? What can that look like? The rights for students in foster care to have the right to stay at their school of origin and transportation to their school of origin. The right for them to have immediate enrollment if they do have to change schools. And then collaboration across points of contact, both at the state level and the local level. So when do these provisions apply? These apply when a student enters foster care and when a student is in foster care and is experiencing a change in foster care placement.
So the definition of a student in foster care. So 24-hour substitute care placed away from their parents or guardians. DHS has placement and care responsibilities. This would include family foster homes of relatives or formal kinship care, group homes, emergency shelters, residential facilities, childcare institutions, pre-adoptive homes, a hotel, or during child reunification or child home placement with their birth parents.
This is a question we receive a lot from the fields. Is a student in foster care? Are they McKinney-Vento? Are they both? So in 2015, when that reauthorization of the Every Student Succeeds Act was finalized, that term awaiting foster care was completely removed from the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act because in 2015, as we've been discussing, though there were specific provisions for students in foster care. So they no longer needed to be covered under the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act. So it's in very rare occasions when a student would be considered both McKinney-Vento and foster care. And that would really require collaboration with the SAU and our McKinney-Vento specialist at the Maine DOE, Signe Lynch, to determine if a student qualifies for both. But again, that's very rare because in 2015, there are now these specific provisions for students in foster care. Jill, do you want to discuss collaboration?
Sure. So for collaboration, regular sustainable collaboration between the SAUs and schools and their DHS and OCFS is critical to ensure school stability for students in foster care. Strong coordination may lead to improved academic, social, emotional, and career and college outcomes for students in foster care. Collaboration should be viewed as essential practice.
So we've mentioned foster care points of contact. We are here for the annual training. So we have different layers of foster care points of contact. We have the state level foster care points of contact, which is for the Maine Department of Education, as myself. And then Jill Hunter is with the Child Welfare Agency with OCFS as the statewide foster care point of contact for the state of Maine. We then have local foster care points of contact at that LEA SAU level. So again, that school administrative unit. Federal guidance uses the term LEA, but in Maine we use SAU. So that's why we're using both of those words. In the next couple of slides, we'll show you how to find those foster care points of contact. As well as SAU foster care points of contact, OCFS has 8 districts that have specific foster care points of contact that support the educational stability provisions. For the LEA, SAU foster care points of contact, we hold this information on neo.maine.gov. There is a list that you can download into an Excel sheet or just look up on the website for specific SAU foster care points of contact. This is updated on an annual basis, as well as if there's changes within the SAU, SAUs are able to update this information as well. I'll drop the link in the chat so that you can have it accessible, or it looks like Sarah is already on top of it and dropped it in the chat for you all. We are working I know many foster care points of contact also hold McKinney-Vento liaisons hats, and we are working on developing an easier way to navigate those SAU foster care points of contact, modeling our contact search off after the McKinney-Vento liaison search. So folks will be able to select where that student is residing, and then that will bring them to that specific SAU foster care point of contact. So we're hoping that will help ease that navigation.
So here you can see the OCFS foster care points of contact. We have it outlined by district. So in District 1, it's Mark Dalton. District 2, Elijah Herrick. District 3, Kayleen Goodwin. Christine Winslow for District 4. Lindsay Karen for District 5. District 6 is Jen Brewer. 7 is Janice Davis. And 8 is Chad Kelly. And then, as ever stated on the statewide point of contact, we have this on our maine.gov website as well for OCFS staff.
And we will, in our breakout rooms, we'll be breaking out regionally across these 8 districts. So folks will be able to meet the different points of contact within your regions towards the end of this training. So now we're going to go over the different roles and responsibilities for both sets of points of contact, for the LEA SAU points of contact and then the OCFS district points of contact. So when we are speaking specifically on the LEA SAU foster care points of contact, through the different areas of those Title I education provisions, we will be highlighting those different areas, starting with best interest determinations. The goal is for these positions to develop collaborative processes for the bid process, coordinating with OCFS staff, with caseworkers, with supervisors, with the larger team across SAUs, supporting that immediate enrollment, so supporting and developing different processes for the immediate enrollment, as well as helping with records coming in and going out, transportation, collaborating and developing local school of origin transportation procedures, and then supporting students in foster care when they enter your SAU and school or when they leave, and coordinating and collaborating, connecting that student with resources. So the main theme here is foster care points of contact is a collaborative role. And I know many foster care points of contact, as well as OCFS foster care points of contact, wear many hats. And so that's why this role is a collaborative responsibility, because it allows and it ensures that many stakeholders are supporting this process and supporting these highly mobile students. And then professional development is making sure folks within your SAUs are informed and aware on Title I educational stability provisions.
So the roles and responsibilities for the OCFS point of contact: to serve as one of the primary contacts for school staff, district personnel, and other service providers. To coordinate with the corresponding LEA SAU foster care points of contact on implementation of the Title I educational stability provisions. To establish a process to notify the SAU when a student attending the SAU has been placed in foster care or experiences a foster care placement change. To establish a procedure for completing a bid process with all relevant parties. To facilitate the transfer of records to LEAs, including immunizations, medical records, and copies of IEPs in Section 504 plans, and supporting documents and other records relating to the provision of modifications and services required by IEPs and Section 504 plans. And to work with the SAU to ensure that students in foster care are immediately enrolled in school and where they need, and to coordinate transportation services. So also to manage the best interest determination and transportation costs between SAU and DHS. To provide training to SAU and DHS staff on educational needs of students in foster care, including state and local policies. To coordinate with the SAU regarding data sharing for students in foster care, consistent with the FERPA and other federal or state privacy laws, regulations, and policies. To coordinate services so that students in foster care can access early educational services for which they are eligible, including Head Start and Early Head Start, home visiting, and preschool programs administered by the SEA and SAU, and screenings and referrals to health, mental health, dental, and other appropriate services. And to inform parents of students in foster care of the students' educational rights and provide public notice of the educational rights of students in foster care to community stakeholders. So just to do a quick check-in, I can't see everybody, but just wondering if any questions have come up from anything we've shared so far.
I do not see anything in the chat right now. Feel free to drop questions in. One question did just pop up from Don Jones. We'll be discussing transportation in a few slides.
I have a question. This is Brian Fairchild from Cape Elizabeth. I thought it's easier for me to say it than write it. In the last slide, you talked about coordinating early intervention services, Head Start services. I'm assuming also you mean special ed services. What if you're not in the cohort yet for next year? So what if a kid's coming from another district that's been receiving, maybe has been in cohort 2, receiving special education services? Would the district that's receiving that student, if they're not in cohort 3 for next year, would they coordinate that with CDS, and how does that work?
Hi, Ryan. I think that's a question for me. And it would be cohorts. He's talking about cohorts, CDS, Child Development Services, and pre-K is moving from Child Development Services to the responsibility of SAUs through these 4 cohorts that have been happening for the past few years, just so that everybody knows what he's talking about. It would be the same as what would happen if a family moved in. If a student was in a school already that had public pre-K and was moving to your SAU that didn't have public pre-K, then you would work with the CDS people and try and get them services near you, if that's what the best interest determination was. Does that make sense?
I guess it kind of like if you're not in cohort 3, let's say, the next year is cohort 3, right?
Yep.
And if you have a pre-K kid that's coming in that has been receiving services to the school district,
Right.
I would think that you would then say, you don't work with me yet because I don't have an obligation. Your obligation would be, here's the contact person in Portland you need to contact around CDS services. But I think that would be your obligation, correct? Because you're not taking on CDS in that year unless you
So
decide to
if you're,
complete.
oh, I see. You're even talking about enrollment in school, right? Because you don't have that grade
Right, because
level
you don't
for
have that
enrollment.
obligation yet. I mean, we're not obligated
Correct.
to do that until August of 2028. So
Yeah.
if you're coming from a district that's
Right.
providing CDS services for a
Yep.
student into a district that doesn't,
Yep.
then you don't have an obligation to be part of that at best interest meeting,
They,
I think, other than to connect them to CDS. Am I
yeah.
correct in saying that?
Uh, that is what would make sense to me. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes. I mean, just as long as you make sure that they might not be able to enroll in your district, but you get them connected with your CDS person so that they can enroll with that CDS person. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm. There was another question. What is the classification of children that have legal guardianship, i.e., under foster care? And Gary, I'm not really sure exactly what you're asking. I don't know if Gary wants to come off mic and give
Yeah,
us some details. There he is.
I have a couple of children who are been in foster care, but they're now under legal guardianship. But what are they considered?
Legal guardianship of whom?
The person who had the children in foster care now
Oh,
have legal guardianship. Has that changed
okay.
that situation?
I think that's a question for Jill.
I'm not sure I know the answer to that. I think it depends. I just want to make sure I'm understanding correctly. So are you saying if the person that was caring for the child became their legal guardian?
Yes.
Okay. Then at that point, if we transfer guardianship to someone, or if it happens through the court process, then they would become the parent in that situation and the decision maker, not the department.
What about services? Are there any services aligned from foster care to legal guardianship?
So, if we there's a couple different directions that we would go in sometimes if it just depends on the case situation. We do open child welfare cases at times to help support relatives or fictive kin providers who get guardianship. And in those cases, we do put services in place and we would work with the local school system where the child is residing, if that answers your question.
I also just put AFFM as a resource, Adoptive Foster Families and Kinship Program of Maine in the chat. They're a really great resource that supports families. And then there was a question about how could we understand how many are having best interest determinations. We'll have a poll question to see how many of you are having those in a few slides. We're going to keep moving just for the interest of time. So when we're talking about, so laying the foundation, we have students in foster care who have these Title I educational stability provisions. Part of that is if a student has to move based on a placement. And the language that we'll be using when we're discussing best interest determinations is part of that is school of origin and school of residence, or can also be called SAU of origin and SAU of residence to encompass catchment areas, feeder schools, and the different nuances within local SAUs. So that school of origin, you'll see the acronym SOO means the school the student was attending when they were placed in foster care or at the time of a change in foster care. The school of residence is that term The acronym SOR means the school the student in foster care resides in after initial placement or when there's a change in placement. There's an important note, and we'll discuss this further, is that students should remain in their school of origin. So where they were when they entered foster care or there's a placement change, unless after a best interest determination is decided that is not in their best interest.
So the best interest determination is a process through which the SAUs and OCFS collaborate to determine whether it is in the student's best interest to remain in the school of origin or to change schools. Collaboration should include individuals who understand the student's unique needs and should be student-centered and context-specific. Students should remain in their school of origin until the best interest determination process occurs. A best interest determination can be completed in advance if there is a planned placement change. OCFS staff provides the SAU initial notification of a student's foster care placement, and a best interest determination process should be co-led by the placing OCFS staff, the school of origin, and the school of residence. This ensures multiple safeguards in place that a bid takes place in a timely manner.
So I'm going to put a poll out, and this is asking how many of you have participated in a bid, a best interest determination? A simple yes or no. I'll give a few seconds on this. Great question, Erica. This is for foster care specifically when we're talking about best interest determination for students in foster care. Things are shifting around. We have almost everyone has entered the poll. So we have yes, 57% of our attendees have participated in a best interest determination, and 43% have not participated. I'm going to end this poll. So there's a few questions about best interest determination meetings or processes. And to capture more about when they occur, so best interest determinations happen when that student enters foster care or there's a placement change that would result in that student in foster care moving or potentially having to move schools based on their residence. This has been around for a while, part of that 2008 Act, then which was furthered in 2015. And then due to the most recent non-regulatory guidance, we're creating even more information and frameworks and supports on a best interest determination. Sarah, did you want to add anything?
No, sorry. I was answering some. Oh, did I put my hand up? I didn't do that on purpose.
No worries.
I was answering another question. So I apologize.
No, that is okay. These are great questions and why we are here today. So keep asking them. And again, if we don't capture your question, we will follow up in email. So if a best interest determination meeting happens, again, that's a collaborative process where those foster care points of contact are reaching out, coordinating, and scheduling a best interest determination. So things that we are considering during a best interest determination is the age, the grade of the student's preference, their attachment to their school, the placement of the siblings, impact of the commute, how long, Maine is a big state, that time of academic year, thinking about, is there a known anticipated length of time for that student's placement, the number of placements the student has experienced, as well as the school climate and the services they can receive.
Aubrey, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Just about best interest, because I think somebody had put in the chat they hadn't been invited to one. And my question is, do you always have to have one? Because we have a number of foster families in our district who we're very familiar with, and the kids, often are coming to them. If the DHS person and the foster parents are in agreement that, obviously registering with our school makes sense, and no one's questioning that, are we required to have a best interest determination? The only time my reason for asking is the only time I've been involved in a best interest is when people were questioning what's the best school for the child to attend versus everyone's in agreement up front that living and, switching to the new school where their foster parent is makes sense.
Definitely. That's a great question, Lisa. And so with a best interest determination, that is up to your local SAUs and your OCFS offices to determine a process that makes sense. Perhaps for those ones that feel like, oh, this is a great fit, the team's on board, maybe that's an email exchange just confirming, setting up the process of who's going to support that student. And perhaps having different levels of what a best interest determination can look like within your SAU and with the OCFS, knowing like, hey, this could be more complicated, like this is a time, these are some variables of when we would be pulling together a team. And so I'd really encourage collaboration within the OCFS teams and SAUs to develop the process for what a best interest determination can look like.
Thank you.
Sarah.
This time I did mean to put up my hand. So Aubrey and I have been having like in-depth conversations the past few weeks, months, because a best interest determination should be made at every change. But like Aubrey was saying, whether it's a formal meeting or whether it's just an agreement between the parties your process is going to look different depending on individual details.
Definitely. And part of that, I'm not sure if we fully addressed Sarah's question of who initiates scheduling the bid. Again, that would fall back to that collaboration, making sure you have those systems in place and making sure it's a shared responsibility due to the many hats you all wear. And Kelly is asking if bids need to be documented somewhere in the student's file. That would be a decision based on your local policies about how you want to track and record that information. So I would encourage thinking about, how are you tracking that information? How is it shared? Where does it live? Is it following the student? What does that process look like? Who is able to see the best interest determination? And we'll have some additional collaborative strategies at the end. And I think we're also really excited for you all to connect to kind of start some of those conversations and then take them from here. So who should be involved in a best interest determination? Again, collaborative, students, parents, guardians, talk with your CPS caseworkers, supervisors about if and when they should be included, resource parents, educational decision makers, legal representatives, guardian ad litem, CPS caseworkers, their supervisors, foster care points of contact, special education, school-based mental health professionals, teachers, and OCFS district points of contact. This is a list of who can be included in these best interest determination meetings. And so again, thinking about what does this look like within your SAU? When do we need to pull in the whole group? When can we have a smaller group? And now I'm going to turn this over to Sarah.
Okay. So I'm here to talk about the small percentage of students who are in foster care who are also in special education, because we want to remember that all students are gen ed students first, and that a bid is a general education process. So I see at least 3, if not more, special education directors here. So sometimes it gets hard when we all wear different hats to remember that this is a general education process. So we're going to have the bid to determine into which SAU the student is enrolled. And during the bid process, we are going to think about special education or 504 needs if the student has it, and what might be offered in one district over another. But that's not the determining factor. That's just one piece of information that gets thought about while the bid occurs. Then, after the bid informs which SAU will hold an IEP meeting, if the student transfers to a new SAU, then the new SAU team would meet to determine how to implement the student's IEP. Sometimes it gets confusing if one student is in a district and maybe happens to be outplaced in a special purpose private school, that people think that it's a given that if that student moves to a new SAU, that they're going to stay at that special purpose private school. And that's not a given. That is up to the new SAU's IEP team to think about what's in district there, what supports the student has. And I guess it depends on how far away they move also from the special purpose private school. So a general education bid and an IEP meeting are 2 separate processes. So when students with special education transfer, here's just the rule out of MUSER, the Maine Unified Special Education Regulations, that says in general, if they're moving from within the same state, then the new school must provide free and appropriate public education, must provide FAPE, including services comparable, until the new SAU either adopts the child's IEP from the previous one or develops, adopts, and implements a new IEP. And for students who are either receiving special ed or are in referral to special ed, and the parents cannot be identified or located, the student is a state ward, or the student's an unaccompanied homeless youth as defined in McKinney-Vento, they have the right to make sure that their educational rights are upheld, and they might need an educational surrogate parent, special education surrogate parent. I'm going to change that. Okay, next one, please. So here's the definition of parent in our Maine Unified Special Education regs, and foster parent is letter B. So I do not really assign very many special education surrogate parents because most kids in foster care are in a foster placement. If a student is moving around, I've got a request this week for a student who's hopping from foster care to foster care because they haven't found him a more permanent placement yet. And so the school is asking for someone who can be a stable person on the IEP team. And so that would be a reason. If students are in residential treatment facilities, we have some of those in the state. And so there wouldn't be any foster parent if you're in a residential treatment facility. So then you would have an appointed surrogate parent. And this is really important for child welfare workers to know is that they cannot and do not hold parental rights for special education. And we go around and do trainings with them. But I mean, I know that their job is to make sure that the child is alive and well and safe and fed and in a good foster home. And so sometimes the intricacies of special ed law gets a little muddled. Um, so this DHHS guardian does have the right to sign things and to enroll them in school and to sign general ed things like field trip forms and whatever agreement they have with their foster parent about who's going to sign that. That's outside of my special ed law. But special ed law says that the DHHS guardian cannot act as a parent for special education matters. Next one. So this is just a little visual. You know, we have about 2,000 kids in child welfare custody. Um, there's a small part of them that have an IEP but are placed in a foster home. So the foster parent holds the special ed rights. And then there's a very tiny percentage of those who have an IEP and placed in a residential setting that's not a foster care home. So they need a special education surrogate parent. This is what the request for a special ed surrogate parent looks like. On the back page, I will ask for recommendations. Sometimes a former foster parent has offered to stay on and volunteer. This is a volunteer role, it's not a paid role. When a kid has left their home and has gone to maybe residential treatment, they've offered to stay on. So that's what the school or the DHHS worker can send to me to get the process going. Next one, please. We do want to ask that the school district, if there is a surrogate parent assigned, to make sure that their name gets put onto the special ed paperwork so that if the student moves from one SAU to another, this surrogate parent contact doesn't get lost. And this is a synopsis of rights and responsibilities for a surrogate parent. It just talks about that they would maintain their file, they'd get to know the student, they would make proper educational decisions in the child's best interest. There are limits at the bottom that's really hard to see, and if you get these slides and want to blow it up, the surrogate parent has no authority or responsibility for the care, maintenance, or financial support of a child or student. Sometimes I get potential surrogate parents asking me, well, what happens if they run away from home? What happens if they do some mischief and they get caught by the court of law? The surrogate parent has no legal ramifications about that. That is on the DHHS guardian. Next one, please. So because there are so very few surrogate parents and because we don't have a great way in the state data system to know, where they are, and I don't know when a child in foster care is moving. If it's known that a student with a special ed surrogate parent is moving to a new district, please ensure that the new school has the SCSP contact information. And that is information about surrogate parent webpage, and that is my email and phone number. Thanks.
Thank you, Sarah. We have time for one question.
Okay.
So if Casey wants to go, and then if there's anything in the chat, again, we'll make sure to capture that later.
I was just wondering whose name should go as the guardian on the written notice. Is it the DHS guardian or the person the surrogate parent or the resource parent?
So the DHS guardian is an invited member of the IEP team. And the resource parent is if the school's going to determine whether the resource parent and the IP team is going to determine whether the resource parent is acting as parent. So then their name would go on it. There's at least two places for parents' names, so the school could put more than one person's name on it. And the DHHS guardian does need to have access to all of that information, whether their name gets put on the written notice or whether, as the parent, or whether they get a copy because they'll be listed in the attendees section. That's going to be a school decision.
Okay.
Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah. Sarah's a wealth
Yes.
of knowledge and
Yes,
information, and I'm sure she'll put her information in the chat as well.
I will.
So this is a dense slide, but just recapturing collaborative strategies for best interest determination meetings. Again, it's just thinking about that local areas, your local SAUs, your local district offices, about coming together to collaborate on what a best interest determination can look like. We do have some sample forms on our website. All these slides will also be emailed out to you, so you will have access to this information. But if you wanted to use one of these, feel free. It is not mandatory or required. We have a few variations on our website. And then I'll let Jill discuss transportation.
So transportation cost should not be a factor when determining best interest. And OCFS and SAUs should collaborate to ensure students who need transportation to remain in their school of origin can do so.
Great. While I'm going over this next part, I am going to launch a poll on transportation, just so that we can gather some more information about what you're experiencing in the field. So feel free to fill this out. Part of what the Maine DOE can do based on students who have an IEP and transportation is written into their IEP as a related service. We are able to reimburse for those costs. It would be great if you have questions on this to reach out directly to Lori Freeman, who is a great resource and can support you in this process. Jill, do you want to cover this one?
Sure. So regarding transportation, so OCFS foster care points of contact will work with the SAU foster care points of contact on transportation. Maine OCFS and Maine DOE state foster care points of contact will collaborate on and create a statewide transportation guide to support SAUs and OCFS staff in developing local transportation plans, protocols, and procedures.
Great. So we're going to shift away. I'll keep the poll open a little bit longer from transportation. So just highlighting, I know Don's question about what resources are available. As Jill mentioned, we will be putting together some statewide guidance on how you can access these resources and what it looks like. Part of those Title I, Part A educational stability provisions is that right to immediate enrollment. Students have the right to enroll immediately into a new school if that is the best interest for that student, without the required documentation that students typically need when they enroll and register into a school. So that should not be a barrier for their enrollment. That does not mean that documentation is not coming. It just means that we should not be delaying that enrollment. And that is another avenue to work collaboratively with OCFS on developing a form or a process for making sure you have access to caseworker information, emergency contact, and information that you might need for that immediate enrollment.
So for school selection disputes, we encourage collaboration during bids to resolve disputes. DHS has the authority to make final decisions about the student's best interest. And during the dispute, student must remain in the SAU school of origin.
So we do have some collaboration strategies, but we only have a few minutes left. And I just want to make sure everyone has time to connect briefly. So I am going to open up the breakout rooms just so that folks can introduce themselves. And we will have the different regions. So if you're not sure which region you should be attending, feel free to utilize this map. So you should be able just to join the breakout room for your region. In this, we'll do quick introductions, your name, what SAU or OCFS district office you're part of. So we'll just be there for a minute.